Good morning, everyone. My name's Sara Bean. I'm editor of FMJ, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this joint webinar being held with FSI, which will discuss how FMs are preparing for a new building reality. As the lockdown rules slowly start to ease, FM's key role is to assure stakeholders from operatives to occupants that their buildings are being safely managed. To do this, they must undertake comprehensive strategy planning to prepare buildings for reoccupation and ensure they're ready for any inspections and compliance checks. They've also got to remain as agile as possible to react to ongoing government guidelines. Pleased to say we've got Compton Darlington, Business Development Director at FSI, and Paul Bullard, the Business Strategy Director, to advise us on the latest digital solutions which can help FMs achieve these aims. On the client side, Richard Wilson, Head of Estate Management at Wimbledon, is here. He's going to be able to provide a rare insight into how they've kept their vast and impressive site running, how maintenance has been affected and altered, how they plan to reopen their site, and hopefully early plans for next year's Wimbledon Championships. Also on the FM services side, we've got David Smith, Digital Transformation Director at Amy, who's here to describe how the group have continued to develop essential services across the UK during the pandemic with a focus on data-driven optimisation. I've got a range of questions for the panel, but if you've got any issues that you'd like me to put to them, we'll pick those up towards the end of the hour. Now, to set the scene, I thought we'd start with FSI to talk to us about the kind of challenges you've experienced in managing dispersed teams and empty buildings. We'll go to you, Paul, for that.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. What we've seen is a real opportunity for FM to change the way that they're delivering the services in terms of we're finally seeing the value of FM actually returning people to work and putting in things in place that encourage and give people trust that the buildings are safe to return to. Now we've seen our customers still managing their buildings through the lockdowns. We've seen a real need for connecting the engineers with their colleagues, because if the buildings are empty, there's a lot more focus on lone working. There's a focus on how can we use technologies to minimise the visits that are required to those buildings. So, for example, why are we sending someone to a building 3 times in a week when, if we packaged up the work correctly, we just send them to one visit, which not only reduces obviously the expenses, but it also reduces the contact times and the touch points they're having with those facilities. So we're reducing the risk. A lot of things we're going to be talking about are around that, the principle of people need to feel safe, and they'll feel safe by seeing what's going on. So FM activity in those buildings, like cleaning as an example, probably needs to raise its status and become a real visible activity rather than an after hours activity. We can achieve all this through the use of technology. And as I said, if we're using things like the ability to scan things, to be able to use mobile devices, to use connected systems, we've got a real opportunity in raising the tech profile of FM at the same time.
Excellent. If we go to you, Richard, if you want to tell us kind of how you guys, obviously the tournament was cancelled this year, what have you been doing to sort of keep things running, and what are you been doing in terms of the sort of management side of the empty sites?
Yeah, we're probably not as sophisticated as some of the people on the call with our use of technology as yet. We have a journey that we're kind of at early stages of starting. But I guess we're facing the same sort of challenges that a lot of people on the call are. We need to ensure compliance within mothballed buildings with a very limited staff on site, both our own teams and the subcontractors. We're having to look at massively enhanced cleaning schedules, both in terms of frequency and in terms of depth of clean. We're having to control reactive task management priorities within that, emergencies that are occurring on site. Again, with pretty limited staff on site. We're having to look at shift patterns. We've got a whole new approach to shift patterns so that we can stagger people's start times, their leaving times, and when they're actually working on the site as well. We need to make sure with a pretty big estate that only the spaces that we've agreed and in control of clean are the ones that are used. People at Wimbledon have a tendency to wander around the estate and go into spaces and use spaces almost at will. And we've had to control that and change that that practice of approach. And I guess the biggest challenge for us has been making sure that we keep in touch with our people, with our teams, while they are working remotely or not being able to fulfill their job at all remotely, making sure they're kept informed, making sure they feel in touch with the team and in touch with the club. So I guess those are challenges.
Yeah, and have you made plans as yet to get people back in the workplace, or is it still very much dispersed working?
No, we actually now have a full estate management team back on site. Clearly, different shifts, staggered work times, but
yeah.
Within the last couple of weeks, we've actually got our full team back on site, out of necessity, actually. As activity grows on the site, with various other departments coming back on site, with members coming back on site, we need to make sure we're there to maintain, keep the site, keep the estate clean and safe and running.
It's an interesting point, actually. It brings in what Paul was saying. People need reassurance. We did a news story this morning that a lot of people are still nervous about going back to work. A lot of this is to do with travel, I think, as much as anything, the actual journey to work. But I think on a psychological level, seeing activity on sites with things being cleaned and people out doing stuff, it makes you feel psychologically more confident. Have you found that with Amy? You must be covering a heck of a lot of different markets as well.
Yeah, I think given the nature of our client base, because we look after schools, the defence sector, and prisons, and they all stayed operational through the whole lockdown period, where schools were still open for key workers. And so it just meant that our frontline operational teams continued to work, and continue delivering those services to that critical infrastructure during lockdown. Where you're talking about, the dispersed nature of our business, that's true. We're spread across the whole country. And some of the challenges with lockdown of people who normally travel a lot for their work and stay in hotels, overnight stays, all that had to stop. And so we had to change the way those individuals operated and enable the working from home environments to become a normal place for people to carry out their work. We have a customer care centre with hundreds of staff who work there, who will take the calls from various clients. That had to then be shifted to enable those people to work from home. So what was normally a call centre operation suddenly became home call centre operation. So we had to transfer all that technology and enabling systems to be able to work and maintain that secure nature of those calls and operations, because working with the defence sector, etc., we have to be highly aware of that secure nature, but we're enabling it to work from home and securely work from home, which was a good challenge, and we were able to do it really quickly, and I was impressed with the way we were able to shift that operation to home working, within a matter of days and weeks.
Have you had inquiries from clients on, what they need to do next in terms of ramping up their buildings and getting them ready? And is the data side becoming more and more important in order to sort of keep tabs on it?
Yeah, absolutely. Data is becoming really the driving force behind a number of things. We're having to make informed decisions using that data. We talked, I think Richard mentioned a little bit about compliance.
Yeah.
Compliance is a key element of our operation. And so we need to actually get in order, to disseminate the tasks that we have to our operatives using technology, handheld devices, so they have all the information at their fingertips is important. And then actually be able to prove that work's been done. And, some of it's, you think is basic use of technology, like the capturing of the images, etc. But we're now capturing those compliance certificates to ensure that we can prove that we are working safely, throughout the lockdown. And as we come out of it, we are getting inquiries from our clients about how we can make certain areas safer or more. Obviously schools have to be thinking differently, and they're having their bubble approach, but working out how we can support that and using technology to support that.
Well, looking at the subcontractor issue, you've got an awful lot of subcontractors coming to sites. They've been doing so throughout lockdown. What kind of automation can you use to monitor these people at a safe distance? Paul, you touched on it earlier. You know, can you give us some examples of kind of some of the client base? You don't have to name names, on how that helps them automate things and keep tally on things without having people to physically sign for things and all that kind of reception security sort of gate thing that is going to have to be minimized as much as possible.
Yeah, sure. The principle of how we can manage our subcontractors, and also this goes into the actual reception that you just mentioned. We're talking about a contactless environment. I mean, so many receptions now are filled with kiosks for checking in, and even in the retail world, you go into every McDonald's, they've got touch screen to select all your food. The doctor's receptionist will have a check-in, and in today's age, who wants to go into a doctor's reception and use a touch screen? We're in a principle now where the technology enables us to do things with the smartphones and devices, so that as people have these devices, we can do geo fencing, so that as they enter a certain area, suddenly we can have proof of attendance without actually having to have them to sign a book or to do a physical check-in. We can have them scan into a certain area. Cleaners, for example, rather than choosing which jobs cleaners could do, why don't we look at a cleaner going to an area, scanning a QR code or an NFC tag, which are all very cheap. We're not talking expensive technology. Then they can be sent all the jobs that are due in that area, so they just carry it out. So we're saying, go to this area, this is your route.
Yeah.
The same thing for subcontractors turning up. We can communicate them to their offices. These are the jobs you want to do. Have them set up all of their prerequisite documents, so you know they've got the right insurance, you know that the right skilled person's being assigned to the work, and then when they actually come to site, we can get them to do mobile inductions on their own devices. So we know they're there, we know they've turned up, we've approved that they're allowed to work there, and they're carrying out the inductions that usually you'd do in person with them.
Oh, amazing. Compton, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, it's the first point really is just about the aspect of where we are given this pandemic and the positives we can take out of it. Front and center of the lessons learned out of this is the fact that the individual well-being is the number one consideration.
Yeah.
In the return back to work, we found, not just with our own business, but with many of the clients, the first consideration is engaging with your employees about whether or not they're happy to return back to work. And that's happening at full scale, never in a way that you would have engaged with your employee and considered their opinion before. It's absolutely essential. We're lucky in having a number of offices in different parts of the globe. And on May 26th, we had the latest update from our Dubai office. And there were some hard and fast rules about, again, I won't give away my age, but they said any elderly person over the age of 60 isn't allowed in the shopping malls. Any individual under the age of 12 isn't allowed in the shopping malls either. So there are a number of the other important takeaway from the whole working remotely aspect of things is that we now find that, and clients are saying to us, we've realized, given how people are able to work remotely, we actually don't need to employ people based on their geographical location anymore. We can just have the best person for the job, irrespective of where they have, assuming their job can be performed largely remotely. And that's a massive positive. We're hearing time and time again. We ourselves are recruiting someone very shortly, and we've gone for the best individual, regardless of where they're situated. It's a massive positive and lesson learned. The other thing I think is to understand that I know yourself, Sarah. Most of your career you've worked from home, and for a lot of people, working from home is the norm. But for people like myself, it's a new norm. But I'm absolutely shocked and surprised about just how well I've fitted into it. So I think the return to work challenge. There have been lots of benefits actually and lessons learned from lots of organisations that have been talking to us.
It's a good point. And also what you're saying about actually being able to sort of expand the regional reach in terms of people that you hire. Obviously, you have to look at it from a long-term perspective that, this is, you know, without being too negative about things, it's this pandemic isn't going away any day soon, so we have to learn to live with it. And I think seeing what happened in terms of the local lockdown in Leicester, it's actually a good example of how we're all going to have to be very, very agile. And again, coming back to the tech, how the tech's going to need to really improve and advance ways of keeping people in touch. And I think it was interesting what Paul said about you know, cleaners being able to use the devices. There's also that issue of people feeling confident about using the tech. I mean, in terms of, say, at Wimbledon, Richard, what have your people said about the sort of remote working experience, and are they open to sort of more sort of digitization?
Yeah, very much so. But I mean, I think the point that I made earlier, we're at the early stages of a journey, and I would say sort of properly integrated tech is an ambition for us rather than actually right now. But interestingly, rather.
Oops, this is tech for you.
To get back to work, well, we run just not a BAU operation with our staff and our suppliers, but we also have significant construction projects across the site, which, you know, everybody will be aware of the developments we've done on site. So the challenge for us has been to almost try and limit people's enthusiasm to get back on site and making sure we're in control of significant numbers returning back to site. That's been our challenge, rather than, you know, I think people, their security and their comfort with being on site hasn't actually been an issue. It's almost been the reverse that we've needed to do.
They want to be there. That's a good point. What I'd like to do actually would be to drill down a little bit and talk about, you know, as buildings begin to reopen, what aspects of a normal working day will need to be looked at from a sort of COVID-19 perspective. We were just chatting earlier before we started about this whole thing about washrooms. People don't want to touch the washroom door. What do? Do you leave them propped open? We're talking about the fact that, you know, people are putting in one-way systems, but people are sort of having to wander past far many people's desks to get to where they want to be. How do you see that translating? I mean, if I go to you, David, in terms of your client base, what have people been saying that their sort of issues are in that respect?
I think it's twofold, because obviously we have our own offices as well, where we have staff, and so and our client base. And I think looking at how you know, COVID has affected how things are going to be moving forward, we're going to have to understand the restrictions and the number of people who can use certain parts of the building. You know, and that's where technology can come into play, because we can start understanding footfall and traffic. You mentioned restrooms and washrooms. We can then start to use, you know, the sensors, etc., to understand when, you know, washrooms have been used and when they need to be cleaned again, so that we can have a cycle of cleaning regimes based around usage. And also, you know, where we do have cleaning routes, etc., we can start using, you know, the plans of the building to change the routes of cleaning, so that we actually become, you know, making sure that people are cleaning areas separately in different parts of the building, so that we get a better coverage with, you know, the people, and keeping them at working safe distances. You know, schools and public services are preparing to, you know, to reopen, and they're going to be having new induction packs and new ways of working. We need to, and it was mentioned previously about having, you know, induction packs, you know, on tablets. You know, that's going to be a new way of working. You know, we utilise a time and attendance system, so for our staff when they arrive and when they leave work. You know, originally that was a touch screen and typing in your codes, etc. You know, during this pandemic, we've had to look at other ways of doing that now. So we've gone completely contactless for those sort of solutions. Yeah. You know, so on a person's pass entry, they can now use a barcode or an RFID code, etc., to scan themselves in, you know, on that same clocking in system. So we've had to look at and adjust the ways that we're working to ensure that our staff are their well-being and they're feeling safe of doing the things that we're, you know, as part of their day-to-day work. You know, so it has been rethinking about some of those little nuances that were used to be. It didn't give it a second thought about clocking in. Now we've had to think about a different way of doing it.
What about things like reception areas? I've sort of heard anecdotally that people are looking at sort of getting rid of any kind of people sitting all day in what would be the petri dish of people coming and going past them, and
No,
using.
absolutely. So we've had to look at the social distancing in that element, and like, if you go to the supermarket where they've marked down the floors, we've got marked out areas so that people can take a social distance away from the receptionist area type place, but again, the signing in, we've talked about signing in, these are all different things. We just have to work out a new way of enabling that to happen and move forward.
Compton, what were your views on that?
I think a key aspect to the whole signing in process, if you think about hotels for one minute, the technology now exists for that key contact aspect of a sign-in, a desk where the concierge hands you your key for your door. You can now use your mobile phone as the device that takes the code that unlocks your door. So there's limiting the contact. And as Paul referred to earlier, everyone's now very used to standing within a kiosk to check in at airports now. That's now going to be standard fare at hotels. Hotels are really at the forefront now of also thinking about using robots rather than individuals to do the client interaction.
Yeah.
So rather than waiting for that person at the other side of the desk to decide whether or not they're going to cite you by the lift shaft in your room or give you a nicer room, there's more of a chance if you have an interaction with a piece of technology to have a greater input to where it is you're cited. So hotels are really at the front and center when it comes to that whole contactless check-in piece. Another aspect, I think, in the social distancing, we may cover this later, sorry if I'm jumping the gun here, but space and move management technology, something historically that was exactly for those two pieces of work, now is front and center, with each individual having a 2 meter or 3 meter halo around them and siting them within a floor plan to ensure you've got distancing. We as a business looked at the government's 50-page document that was issued about 2 months ago and took all the key things that we as a business need to address. And our clients have said the same thing. And you spoke earlier, Sarah, about the bin you need to get to could be 6 feet away, yet you need to go on a one-way system around the entire office to achieve that. I think all of that has to be accepted, at least in the short term, as the new norm.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things that we can talk a little bit more about, the sort of automated booking systems. I mean, that they sound like the best way of planning, but at the same time, how automated can it be? Do you have to sort of try and keep teams together, for instance, so that, or do you have to split them up so that if one gets COVID, half the staff can come back into the office? How can these systems actually work in practice?
I think, that's definitely a thing that will be becoming more emerging in that technology space of how we manage, the floor spans and the desk space and the utilization. I think we've got to also be very careful with the emergence of this technology. I'm not saying everyone's going to be doing it, but there are going to be those that are, so selling the dream that is actually not a reality. And so I'm sure many people on the panel and those that are listening will have had many contacts through LinkedIn and email saying, we've got this new sensor that we can deploy to you, that will enable you to ensure social distancing is maintained. All sound really great, but you just have to look at each one of those in their individual use cases and see whether or not it will fit into your ecosystem, and add value rather than using technology just for the sake of using technology, because it's not always the answer. Because it will just be a reworking of your, the normal processes that you've currently got that can be rewritten and just adjusted slightly to enable you to meet the new normal.
That's a very good point, and it's something actually I'd like to put to Paul, because he knows about the tech. There's been an awful lot of sort of snake oil being sold, in terms of people kind of email me about thermal temperature taking or zapping people with lightsabers as they go into buildings to kill COVID. So people have to be very careful about how they invest in the tech going forward.
It's really important. I mean, I couldn't agree with David more that the whole thing is about actually showing the value of any of these things that are being brought in and being implemented. The market's awash with great new ideas, when in reality all people are doing is repurposing the things that they already had, and putting a COVID-19 badge on it and back out to the market. I mean, I think it's important that businesses are able to adapt to the situation and use the things that they've got in the correct way. I mean, some of the things that we've been talking to customers about is room booking, for example. We're seeing companies questioning the need for meeting rooms moving forward. So the meeting rooms are now taking up space in their office that they could be used for office space to give their people more space to work. So if that's the case, meeting booking software, you could say, how's that going to be used? It could be used on things like where we're using Teams or Zoom here, but then the booking systems could actually be repurposed in an office in a different way. For example, you don't want 20 people going to the photocopier at the same time, or 30 people turning up and trying to make a coffee. So how about we offer the end users the ability to actually grab a slot? And it's the same principle of time management and actually booking those things, so that we can use that technology, but in a different way.
So people can, if they say, you think, right, I want a coffee at 11:30, you basically click on the company's system or an app, and then you know that when you get to the machine, you're not having to sort of stand for 20 minutes.
Yeah, so that's where the customers are telling us. They're saying that they just need that ability just to manage people in a different way. The same ways FMs are going to need to know how many people are coming into the building, when they're coming into the building. It's all very well the individual departments all section off their staff so that we know these. But if you're changing working hours, that changes the way we need to deliver facilities services. Are we now a 24-hour operation rather than a 9 to 5?
Well, the other thing is, what we've been talking about for years before all this was agile working, touchdown points. People were cutting the size of their real estate so that they could fit more people in. How on earth is that going to look? And can the CAFAM systems help monitor things like touchdown points, so that people can work on a particular desk one day, it's completely and utterly sanitized for the next person to come in the following day? How can that actually work in practice?
I think it definitely can work. I would say. Sorry, Paul, but it definitely can work if that's the direction of travel we need to get to. Again, it's understanding how those offices and businesses are being utilized, and we can do that with, you can have sensors. You can have your desk configuration systems. You can understand when desks are being utilized and when they're not, and if they have been used, you can ensure that it's an automated task that's raised within the CAFAM system to ensure that that desk is cleaned at the appropriate time during the day. So all these sort of automated processes can take place as you start linking in the data that's being fed from other systems through your CAFAM system to actually start generating FM tasks and M&E tasks, so that things are done when they're needed to be done. It's just understanding.
Sorry, I interrupted, but I think it's important. Excuse me, though, but I think it's been important for us that all of the tech improvements are hand in hand with behavioural changes and some cultural changes for us. Yeah. Because the challenge, we have the luxury of a pretty big estate, so we can, to bring people back into an office environment is relatively easy to do. We can plot places for them to use around, as I say, a pretty big estate. The thing that has challenged us is getting, Wimbledon's a very social place to work. People like working with each other, but to stop people from walking around and talking to their friends and their colleagues, to people used to working different shifts, to get people much more used to lone working, and to take out the normal social interaction of their day-to-day activity. So we've actually had to schedule people to have staggered breaks, schedule people to have a coffee break, etc., etc. So the cultural change has to go hand in hand with the technology improvement for me.
That's a very interesting point, and that sort of takes us to the whole remote working aspect. You've got a lot of operatives who are out there who are running, doing like maintenance checks, who are in relatively empty buildings. How do you monitor people remotely in terms of their health and safety aspects particularly. Paul, do you want to take that?
Sure. In terms of it's all about the connectivity and being able to connect all of the workforce with their colleagues, and the ability for the systems and the devices to know where people are, like we said with the contactor checking, to know that someone's actually arrived at a building, so know that someone's working there, and to make sure that the building supervisor or the contract manager are aware of and in communication with them through apps on their phone, so we can see that if they have any challenges, if they're maybe they haven't reported in for a period of time, maybe the task that they were performing, it hasn't been completed, so we need to get in touch with them. All of this it's all online, and it's all available through the devices now.
Compton,
I don't think it matters where you are, whether you're a supervisor somewhere.
Another aspect that we in particular as a business have initiated with that to talk about ensuring that an individual is actually okay is our support team, for instance, who are a very social team of people in their home environment now. On their second screen, they have a colleague's face live feed, so they're able, if they want to, talk to that individual. An individual can talk to them. So two people can speak to each other and see each other every day. It's a social interaction thing. As directors, we've been given a level of responsibility to ensure particularly lone individuals aren't being affected by the environment we find ourselves in. And certainly our support team, with having a colleague on a screen next to you all day is a real step in the right direction.
That's a really positive thing. I've not heard of that particular approach so far. It's very interesting. I went to a remote conference with the RICS last month, and there was a coffee break. I went down to my kitchen and made my coffee, and I suddenly felt really sad, because I thought, this is where you're normally doing your networking stuff. Yeah. So it's like Richard's saying, people want to be back in the workplace, but they can't congregate in the breakout areas like they did before. That's just not possible. So again, it takes us back to the tech. It's like all these remote pub quizzes, choirs, etc. I suppose in a way, if we start to look at the positives of this, what kind of developments is this going to mean in terms of people's confidence of using tech, and how it can be actually kind of integrated into working lives, especially if people are working part of the time at least at home? I mean, are you finding that?
I think we've had, because people are now working more and more at home.
Yeah.
Obviously, DSE tests were commonplace anyway, but we've had to really understand the amount of time people are spending in front of their computers now. Because it used to be in the office, like you were saying, you had your coffee room chats, and so you always had those inherent little breaks, and people can quite quickly find themselves stuck to their desk looking, and on Teams calls and on Zoom calls, because if you've got a half an hour free in your diary, someone throws a meeting in straight away. You've got to be really cognizant of that. And so at AIMU, we're thinking about that well-being of the people at home as well. And we're doing monthly surveys now to make sure that people are, how they're feeling and what their well-being is like. We're doing well-being Wednesdays once a month, so senior leaders get involved and start talking to different people of different parts of the business to understand how people are feeling and operating. So it's definitely always been front and center as our well-being of our staff, but it's actually, now that we're remote, from some of our staff more than ever, it's that interaction through the use of technology is vital.
Yeah.
So they'll stay connected.
I think it's taught us a lot. It's taught us a lot about how we manage people, how we conduct meetings. I think our meetings are a lot more efficient than they used to be, because they need to be. The information is provided. Discussion tends to be shorter because it's through Teams or Zoom or whatever else. But I think another advantage it's definitely given to us is it's taught us about a more efficient use of our estate, of the plant equipment, and simply the spaces, because we've mothballed so much of it over a period of time. It's taught us that we tend to historically have opened a lot of space and run a lot of plant equipment that's actually unnecessary away from the championships. So it's taught us a lot about how we operate and run our site too.
Well, looking at a bit more at the long term, we all agree that the technology has been, it's been a saving grace, really, hasn't it, with lockdown? If this had happened 20 years ago, what would it have been like? There was obviously video conferencing. It wasn't very good. So, my feeling is, and see if you agree, that the positive, a big positive to come out of this is that FM has really become to the forefront. I've never had so many conversations with people about writing about the FM space. People are like, oh, this is you. Somebody said to me, you've come into your own now, haven't you? As if I'd engineered it all. But there is that issue, the fact that FM is front and center of a lot of how we're going to move forward. And also, sorry, it's a very long question, what the sort of impact the digital technology will have on that, and how the developments will sort of help to streamline some of these issues that have come up.
I think in the past, technology and FM, didn't always go hand in hand with regards to, the cutting edge technology, what's coming on the next horizon, because, it was always, it's never good to talk about price and cost, but it was always, there was a cost inhibitor to it. We couldn't get to it because of the price of certain things, and sensors and all those sort of stuff have come down now in their price point, which enable us to actually start utilizing them. We can then start and marry, BIM, the BIM modeling from construction industry, really throw it through into the FM world, to marry up with, our BMS systems and how we control the temperature and the airflows through buildings. And then, and linking our CAFAM, so we can now start seeing, red areas on a building when there are too many people in that area or something like that. And, and start marrying everything together so that, it's a, I suppose I'm talking about a digital twin type piece of work.
Yeah. But
really, really open and harness that sort of capability in the future. And clients will be more willing, I hope, to look at those, even with the cost points around them, because they're going to add really good value into the well-being, the movement of staff, also, the preventative and predictive maintenance on really important assets that we look after, all can be visually and seen, and you can interact with it to make it all remote, all automated, so that you can actually minimize the contacts of people and make working, in crowded environments a bit more safer.
And we've had the challenge and the ambition. Also, we've learned a lot about the ambition to have the kind of holy grail of joined up interactive technology as well, rather than just lots of separate bits of technology that all do a silo part of what you're trying to achieve. That the pursuit of that joined up nature of it and the interactive nature of it will be important for us going forward.
That really dovetails for me into a really important question I think we're going to come on to, but it's probably right to raise it now. We're finding that increasingly now, when IT form part of the procurement for systems like ours, they're actually leading the way. FM systems, IDWS systems, can no longer be viewed in isolation. Absolutely not. They need to be seen as a joined up part of the whole and be integrated into the business. And also front and center. For instance, you may not know, one of the larger service providers in the industry at the moment is reeling at the moment from a major cybersecurity issue that they're having. And cybersecurity, from an IT perspective, is front and center. So any IT system being procured that has to be part of an ecosystem, and it also has to be able to integrate data in both directions from things like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. And we're finding that every conversation we're having now means that FM, in some instances, when it comes to the procurement system, are almost a sideshow. IT is at the forefront of that because this system needs to be part and parcel of the business ecosystem.
I understand where you're going. I challenge a little bit on that. IT, without a shadow of doubt, have to be involved, because it is, IT enables the access to all the systems and the infrastructure, and also enables that integration, which we've mentioned. But the needs of the business and the customer need to be at the forefront, because we're the experts in our fields, and so we should be determining what our requirements are and then have the support of IT to deliver it, rather than IT saying this is what you need, because otherwise you'll quite quickly find that you're being given something that isn't fit for purpose. And so
we're on the same.
It has to be a married, a good relationship.
Absolutely, David. We're on the same side of the fence completely with that. It's just that the reality we're now finding, I'm sure as you are as well, is that IT are at the front of that queue, it seems.
They're kind of, yeah.
I mean, we have to understand the security nature. That is a very, very key and fundamental part of everything that we do now. Not only, from a GDPR perspective, but just access to the data. Everything needs to be secure. We work in the defense industry, and so we have an even more stringent level of security around that, and rightly so. So everything that we wish to do, we need to actually kind of ask permission and make sure that we can get it accredited and make sure that it is secure for use. So it does mean we have a longer lead time to get things in, but we just need to make sure that the data and the access is secure. So it is essential, that's for sure. On that.
Yeah. Again, just to labour that point a little bit more, long gone are the days, thankfully, where FM were forced to use systems that were inappropriate because it fitted in with business systems. So in days gone by, FMs were regularly asked to use IT-based help desk systems or other systems meant for other purposes. We are no longer the poor relations in that process, but you're right.
The CAFM system, like concept evolution, for example, more and more things are being able to be done through that system, and so it becomes more and more a key component in delivery of our services, and so yes, we clearly have some business continuity plans in the event of something being not available, but that is a core component of our offering, and so we need the support of IT to ensure that delivery is consistent. Otherwise, if that fails, we have, it's a big risk, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll be opening us up to some. There's quite a few questions have come in, so I'll be throwing some wild cards at you. I just sort of to end our sort of formal discussion, as it were. We talked about how automation is taking a leap forward really with this. Any kind of major crisis, you do find this that people start to look for specific solutions. I mean, if you look at your virtual crystal ball, what do you think will be kind of the developments with or without COVID that will happen within CAFM and sort of the automation of the workplace over the next few years? Let's throw that one to Paul first.
Okay. It's got to be around the data and using data in a very different way than FM's ever approached it before. We're talking about using data to actually drive systems and decisions of those systems, rather than using it in the traditional sense of what happened last month, what did we fail on, what we being penalised on. It's got to be used in that smart way of actually, we've got so much data out there, and even the systems, you think 15 years ago when people were filling in paper job cards, and now everyone's out there with mobile devices, they're capturing real-time information, and it's that data that can help you. Even simple things like estimated times of planned maintenance tasks. Why aren't we driving back into the systems the actual times that we're returning from the engineers? We could be planning a 4-hour job every week when it's only ever taken us 2 hours.
Yeah.
Starting off at that simple level and then raising it to something really smart is where I think FM needs to go.
I agree with that. You've got to look at how we estimate, how we feedback. At the end of the day, we talk about FM and facilities management. We are so much more than that these days. We are true asset managers. We need to understand exactly the whole life cost of an asset. Working with our clients to ensure that they invest in the right place that gets the most benefit for them and their customers and users. And so, like you said earlier, because of this pandemic, FM has been thrust into the limelight, because we're normally the silent partners who you don't see, and the school children turn up to school and the school is clean. So, those sort of things will still take place. but we need to look at the emerging technology and how we operate as an industry to take, get the best use out of that new technology, and learn lessons from other industries and see where we've not looked before, how we can start deploying that, and how we can change the culture of our own employees and our clients to be open to those changes.
Yeah.
And I think a trend, definitely for me, it's been coming for a while, but we've seen it accelerate recently, is this issue of transparency with the end client. The end client is increasingly asking for access for a two-way interaction with service being provided. So some sort of portal, and also a big value add that we're seeing in other parts of the world from an FM perspective, but coming to the UK now, is a big service provider giving access to the end client to order additional services beyond within the confines of the contract, but beyond that immediate service delivery. So we're working on something called Marketplace, which is exactly as it says. It's a service provider offering out to their end clients. Do you need dry cleaning done? Do you need extra services that maybe on the face of it we don't provide? So that we see that as an increasing trend, that increasing transparency with the end client.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay,
And I would make a final plea, and I know it's not, Paul, forgive me, I know it's not exactly what you were saying. It's not just data, it's intelligent data. And it's data that we can analyze intelligently, because I'm a firm believer that good intelligent data informs intelligent decisions. So it's not just bulk data, it's joined up intelligent data that we can analyze.
That's one thing I would definitely say, I'm sure you all agree. In our business and industry, we generate vast amounts of data. And it's now the chance to actually look at how we unlock that data, get the insights that we can actually then drive changes for ourselves and our clients. And that's optimizing the data that we use. And if there's gaps in that data that we're currently not collecting, but, look at how we can plug those gaps so that we can actually then get more, enhancements and insights. Definitely.
And it's also, is getting the data going to help to drive that whole sort of productivity gap thing, and that evidence of performance being enhanced by the facilities being provided, which is something obviously the sector has been looking at for years. Yeah. Good. Right. So we've got a lot of questions here. Oh, some good ones. People are asking actually quite a bit about the ventilation aspect. That's something that has come up quite a bit, obviously, about COVID. There's concerns about how you monitor ventilation. I've even heard some places have switched off ventilation. How can
I think as we learn more and more about COVID and how it is transmitted and how it flows, then yes, we need to understand how we can control that ventilation, monitor, further any contaminants within that ventilation.
Yeah.
But it is as we learn more about any virus, airborne.
Yeah, there is technology that exists, and it's coming to the fore again to put a maximum distance between the point at which the air comes into a room and the point at which it leaves the room, to put the maximum distance between those 2 points, because ventilation, and also people are talking very tactically about ensuring in any office now, the fashion was to certainly keep your windows closed and use your air conditioning. The fashion should be going forward to open your window as much as possible. But the intelligent ventilation you'll now start to see come to the fore. Right,
excellent. There's quite a lot of questions here about intelligent sensors. Is there any IoT sensors or any kind of thermal imaging to detect, capture air quality, touch surfaces, instead of continuously cleaning all areas? Very interesting idea, actually.
So I know, in some of the banking sectors, they do have sensors on desks when desks are used, and so they can understand usage of desks, which can then highlight whether or not they need to be cleaned. But there are going to be more and more sensors that become readily available and that do monitor certain things. But I think, like we said previously, we just have to really understand the use case and that it is going to add that value to ourselves and our clients.
Also, I would imagine you'd need to be very careful who you buy if it's kind of a particular random technology, which is, promising that it's going to, as I said, zap people as they come into a building to kind of clean out the COVID. I was told that you would need more power to, you end up zapping the person themselves for that to succeed. So again, I mentioned earlier, you've got to make sure, I would assume, that the tech is reliable and it's from a good source and it's part of an overall strategy, rather than, oh, we'll try this and it'll be fine and everyone can come back in.
Yeah, I think that comes back to again, just our standard ways of working and sensible product selection and having, you know, business cases for certain things, and then you know, supply chain selection process.
Oh, another one which we did touch on slightly, but we didn't. We talked about washrooms. This one's about lifts. Lifts in buildings are a key choke point. What are the panelists putting in place to try and deal with this?
Yeah, it is a choke point in any building, is the lift, you know, especially if you're trying to social distance. We're quite fortunate in some of our in our client base that we don't have lots and lots of lifts, and so we've not had to, as of yet, look at how we manage those.
We clearly don't have many high-rise buildings, so we don't have perhaps the challenge that other buildings and estates do. But we've tried to minimise the use of lifts where we can, and suggest that people use the stairs where it's appropriate, which may sound obvious and simple, but it works. And then when we've had to use lifts, we actually mark them out to make sure people are facing away rather than facing to each other, and the simple reaction of making sure they're regularly cleaned, like common touch points, such as you know, obviously the buttons within the lift. We put the hand cleanser on the way into the lift, make sure we clean the touch plates very regularly, and make sure we mark out the lifts. But the starting point is try and minimise their use where we can.
Paul, would you say that, I mean, we were talking earlier about kind of ordering your coffee. Is there a way of optimizing when you want to use the lift? You know, you've got a meeting on the 16th floor at 12 o'clock. You sort of book a lift slot so you don't have to slog up 16 floors of stairs. I
think that's got to be the way forward, that people have the ability to connect to those services through their mobile devices, and it's, again, we're down to the challenge of a building and IT and how we're allowing all of this connectivity, because we've got to be very careful with all the security. You can imagine if people can connect to a lift through their mobile devices, who's to say what people could do with those lifts? So it's that balance in that. The technology is there. I'm not sure. It's interesting what we were saying earlier. We've been I would say fighting, but we've been trying for years to move the industry forward from the traditional CAFM, or the computer aided facilities management, into this integrated workplace. The IWMS, the Integrated Workplace Management Solution, it is what it says. It's connecting all these systems, joining them together, not necessarily having one system, but bringing all this data. So suddenly you've got your lifts connected to your mobile apps, connected to your workplace well-being, connected to your canteens and your coffee machines. And suddenly we're able to give the end user a very different experience, a very positive experience. And it's what we were saying earlier about, this is all about confidence. We've got to make people feel as though that the workplace we're providing is safe, and all the good things that FM doing, we need to publicise. And we do that through apps, through communications, through websites. They need to see all this activity that we're all doing in their hand, so that they know that when they come back, this is why they're going to be safe. Very good point. There's actually some more questions here on FM and IT. As FM IT systems are being integrated into business as usual and combined with increased working, how's data security being addressed? So you've got people who are obviously working from home. We did touch on this a little bit. Are there any other points in that area that you want to take up?
No, I think I did touch on this, and for us, this is the biggest trend at the moment. Our head of technology, during a recent meeting, really made an issue of this. He's being asked to speak at a number of major meetings now, where the biggest part of the discussion is cybersecurity. It drives everything at the moment, and again, with the way we're all working remotely now and being forced to work remotely at little or no notice, the security aspect of that has probably not been what it should be. So that is now becoming very, very important, critical, in fact. And with some of our some of the social media commentary about things like 5G, skewing those discussions, it's become very critical.
Actually, an allied question, which is quite an interesting one, is about monitoring people to do tasks, information privacy, and people getting stressed because of a big brother culture. So, I mean, things like people being online and being monitored. I know there was a couple of, there was one big company that was kind of being criticised for that. How do the tech can help, as in you said, Compton, with people having a colleague next to them? Is it also something we need to be careful about, and that people feel under pressure? And I know we've touched on this as well with wall-to-wall Zoom meetings and things like that. I mean, Richard, what have your people said about this?
There hasn't been much of a pushback on it, but I think the key thing is to just be very open and honest with people and explain to them why you have to implement the technology.
Yeah,
and it's always the case when you're implementing change, implementing stuff like that. Just be open and honest with people and explain the purpose, and they get it.
Yeah.
I'd also say, that sort of monitoring is not new. It's not come out of the pandemic. Whenever we allocate a task to someone and they deliver that task, it's always been part and parcel of that, even when it was paper-based. When did you start the task and when did you finish the task? And so it's not a new monitoring piece. But yeah, like Richard said, it's all about culture and bringing our staff on that journey if we do introduce anything new, so that they understand the reasons behind it and are brought into it themselves.
Actually, on a more positive note, somebody actually said real-time monitoring of the tasks on a mobile device will allow FM to validate the user's decisions. So, users tend to choose the easy rather than the important next task. Monitoring this will aid the FM to better manage the task. So that's actually a real positive, that people will, that they can't kind of skirt around or I'll get round to that. They'll get on.
But it goes to that, utopia position where there used to be the desire to have dynamic schedule, an automated task passed to people everywhere, and is that something that is the aspiration and still the desire and the need of the industry, or are specific, because some clients will have different needs and desires, and so you need to be able to adapt for that. And some will want, especially if you've got mobile workforce spread across a large region, you will want to start looking at that scheduling of tasks so that you get the most efficient use of the staff, of our operatives.
Great, we've got a lot of questions here. We probably won't have time to go through all of them, but what we'll do, if that's okay, will be to pass the questions on to the panel if you would like to sort of answer some specific ones. I'll just do a couple more. This is kind of allied. What was the panel's view on tracking staff when people are on site? I suppose that's as much an HR issue as it is an FM issue, but obviously it's needed from a health.
Interesting. I've got a little bit of an anecdote about that. When I was involved when we were rolling out a large volume of our mobile devices to a local authority, and I was asked to go to a meeting, and there was a representative of the workforce, but it was also a representative of the union sat next, who was asking that very question about just how closely will you be monitoring our members, and what data will you be keeping on them? So it's an issue, but as David said, the world's moved on. We used to do this back in the T card days. When did you start the job? When did you finish it? Of course, there's bending the rules about just how long was your lunch break. Now you can monitor people. At the end of the day, all you're asking people to do is their job, and I think that the aspect of invading people's privacy is an issue. It's something I'm sure everyone listening here and people on this panel, at the start of the pandemic, those people that weren't used to working from home felt duty bound to be in front of their screen and couldn't move away from it, because they felt they were being absolutely monitored for every second of every day. The reality is, for goodness sake, you can take 5 minutes to go make yourself a cup of coffee like you would in the office, but people didn't feel they could. But people are now getting used to the environment or the working practices of working from home.
Here's a good kind of allied question to the privacy issue. Any thoughts on insisting staff and visitors complete online health questionnaires accreditation before they're allowed on site? That's actually quite key, isn't it? This is the idea of, like, when you're going through airports and stuff now, they're talking about taking your temperature. Should that be automated system for anyone going into a building, whether it's an operative or a member of staff? Paul, what's your view?
It's something that we've had to implement for some of our customers on the contractor side. So whether we have the subcontractors coming on site, they want to give their staff the reassurance that whoever's coming has completed the appropriate checks. So they first of all, they'd insist that the company that is subcontracted has a COVID-19 policy in place. And then when the actual engineers turn up, they will carry out that as their pre-induction onto the site, so that then the building manager can choose if it's appropriate or not for them to attend. I'm not sure. I think the privacy things have been relaxed a bit because of the situation. And I think everyone understands that everyone's doing their best to try and keep each other safe. And so there hasn't been too much. We're not seeing too much resistance. That may change as the buildings become more and more occupied. But it's also a step towards helping to get them reoccupied by providing that reassurance for the people.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so we'll wind it up. There are a few other questions that I can put to you guys, if you don't mind answering some specifics that have come through. And then the final question, of course, is to Richard, which is, number one, will the championships take place next year? And number two, can we all have tickets?
Yes, of course, as many free tickets as you want. And clearly, cancelling the championships was a very sad thing for us to do this year. You get amazed by how seriously people take it and what almost a national treasure of an occasion it is for people. So it wasn't a decision that was undertaken lightly, and I think it was the right decision, and I think it was taken at the right time. Clearly, we are having to anticipate at this point a COVID-secure championship for next year. There is a determination to make next year's championship as good as it can possibly be. And the way we are doing that is we're already into detailed planning of what the championship might look like next year. And the starting point has to be a COVID secure one, but we're looking at a whole range of scenarios from that, from one extreme, which is just a full championship and as normal, as everybody would expect a championship to look like, all the way through to, I guess, a championship behind closed doors. And you have to consider everything within that spectrum and start planning for a number of different scenarios with that. We also, we would have been in the second week of the championship now, if it had been running. We've got plenty of time to look at that and plan that, and there are plenty of big sports occasions between now and then, not least, I guess, the US Open and the French Open, which are planned to still go ahead in various formats. So we've got plenty of opportunity to learn from others' experiences and what other people learn from putting those major sports events on between now and next year's championship.
Brilliant.
So we are looking at a whole range of possibilities for that.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, hopefully it'll go ahead next year. We're all keeping our fingers crossed we get back to some kind of normality. But
absolutely,
it's been very, very useful talking to you guys about the sort of digital world that we can use instead. This session will be written up as part of the FMJ August issue, and we'll also get back to people. I think what we'll do in that is include some answers to some of the outstanding questions we didn't get to. And I'd just like to thank everyone for their contribution, and FSI for telling us about what they've been up to particularly. And thanks a lot. Good morning.